Hey there, welcome to the My Risk Advisor podcast. This podcast is for anyone in the financial planning ecosystem with a focus on life risk insurance. I'm your host, Phil Thompson, Director and Financial Advisor at Sky Wealth, and I've been on a business journey over the last few years going from a struggling holistic advice firm with one staff member, considering packing it all in, to pivot the business now to being one of Australia's leading specialist insurance advice firms with over 7 advisors, 30 team members, and helping hundreds of clients every single year get important insurance cover in place. I am unashamed to say that this podcast is so I can continue to grow and develop as an advisor and a business owner as I interview some incredibly smart individuals. So keep on listening so you can learn alongside me. All right, welcome to the My Risk Advisor podcast. One of the best things about doing this podcast is I get to have guests on who I have an immense amount of respect for, who are incredibly intelligent, thoughtful, and I think the advice industry is so much better off at them being a part of it. And other times I have guests like Sue. No, just kidding.
You were going there. I was going to pipe up and say, but why have you got me?
You are definitely one of those people. So for anyone who doesn't know Sue, Sue is best known for her work with Elixir Consulting, and since merging last year is now the General Manager of Consulting at Virtual Business Partners. So welcome to the podcast, Sue.
Thanks, Phil. Although I will correct you, it's Vital Business Partners. Now, it was virtual. I know. We're still VBP, but it was rebranded to Vital.
I was going to say VBP, but in my business, we actually have no acronym rule. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to do an acronym. So Vital Business Partners.
Business Partners, yeah.
Got it, because you're vital to the business and you're no longer just
actually virtual. Yeah, we're real people. And we have real people. They just happen to not live in your country, our country.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the stuff I want to talk about is, you talk a lot about like efficiencies and how to help business. And that's kind of what you've been doing for many, many years. So I love data and I love reports. I geek out on data all the time. One of the things that you guys have done is the advice operations report that you released. So kind of, let's just talk more broadly about why you've been doing these reports, because you've done lots of pricing reports and these reports. So why do you do them? How long have you been doing them for? And give us a history of that.
Great. So it feels like forever. But I had been, it's 18 years since I started Elixir. And when I very first started, I had actually had this idea to create research into what pricing models were being used, because way back then, and I know you were a baby then, but way back then, commissions were that was just it. That's all we did. That's all we knew of as a
investment commissions, insurance commissions.
And insurance commissions, absolutely. And pretty much every other commission that you want to speak of. And new ones got created, like volume-based commission, volume-based commission, all that sort of stuff. But at that time, I knew, because I was coming in coaching firms, I just knew that there were a lot of firms that the commission model just didn't work for them. And some of the underlying issues that they had in their business were due to cash flow timing, and the other kind of elements that were influenced by the structure of those commissions. And at that time, it wasn't really an ethical thing. It wasn't really about, is this in the best interest of the client? But it was, well, actually, no, I tell a lie. That was wrapped up in it, because too often I would see people having behaviours and actions in their business that were driven by the structure of commissions, not intentionally intended to happen because of the way businesses had to run. And so I knew that there were quite a few firms that had started charging fees already, and I saw the impact on that. And people just kept telling me, "Oh, I don't believe it. I can't understand how that works." And so I wanted to get more in-depth research other than just the anecdotal stuff that I had. And so I came up with this harebrained idea, because I kept looking for it and there wasn't any at the time. So this harebrained idea was like, all right, I'm going to go and find all these firms that I can who do fee models, and I'm going to interview them. I'm going to put this research together. That's actually why I started Elixir, because I was finding that a few people would go, well, hang on, because I was with the licensee at the time. Oh, you're not part of my dealer group. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable talking about this kind of stuff. So I realized, you know what? I love doing what I do. I think I need to do it with an independent stance behind me. And so I set up Elixir. So back to your original question, why do we do these reports? I think it's really important. We're really privileged as consultants. We're really privileged to know some really intimate details of advisory businesses, and how they do things. And when that is anecdotal, particularly when you're taking people maybe outside of their comfort zone or sharing knowledge with them that is so foreign to them, naturally we all as humans have a bent to want proof points and want to know that we're not just listening to somebody that is a good talker and then not telling truths or stretching and using their imagination. So if we're going to make some fundamental change to our business, or if we're going to change our mindset around what's possible, the best way I have found to be able to do that is to help with stories of how to do it, but also really importantly, back that up with proof points that you may not be the first to do this. There's others that have come before you. Let's collectively learn from others' mistakes and others' challenges and observe what we see across different businesses, because I think that's important to include in our decision making. I don't think anybody should look at a statistic or a piece of research and go, I have to do that because this is what the research says. But I think it's just helpful for people to understand different ways and possibilities that they might not otherwise be privy to see.
Yeah, that's right. And like, big, broad research doesn't only tell you exactly what you need to do in your business, but also neither should like anecdotal, like, because someone will give an anecdote, what's working in my business at Sky is going to be very different to what will work in another business. So, utilizing both the anecdotes from individuals and your own experience, and then using this research. So I just want to kind of touch on the research. So just to wrap some numbers around it, because I've done my homework. Well, it's a 124-page report, so I haven't read the whole thing.
I'm going to test you, but
no test. But you got insights from 171 advice firms, which represented 561 financial advisors, 43 risk specialists. So that's like 80% of the risk specialist market you've got in there.
Yeah. Well, and I'll clarify that. They were not, there was only 1% of that 171 firms that were risk specialist businesses. So a lot of those 43 risk specialists were risk specialists sitting within a multidisciplinary firm.
Yeah. And then you got 72 accountants and then 24 mortgage brokers, finance people in the data set. So It's good to understand kind of, what makes up a data set as well. Like if you've interviewed 10 people, then, you take the research with a bit of a grain of salt. When you've got a pretty broad group of people, it's super helpful. So I want to kind of talk on the takeaways from it. So the great thing about this report, anyone go to, what website are we going to get this report?
vbp.au. No.com, just very simple, vbp.au.
Great. You can find the Advice Operations Research Report 2024. Go and download it.
The other thing, I will also give you, a link to drop in the show notes, which will actually take you straight to that page to be able to.
Let's do that. That makes a lot of sense. And so I guess, some of the key takeaways, the great thing about doing these reports is you can just go straight to the key findings and then just read that, and then you can maybe skip the rest if you don't want to read the rest. So I'm going to test you. What are some of the key takeaways? I've gotten them written down if you don't have them in front of you.
Well, actually, here's one I prepared earlier. I do have my hard copy report. Actually, we've got some hard ones printed. So with this particular research, we were really looking at the back office operations of firms, right? So we love this ability and language, I think, around creating a secret sauce. And so we said, okay, with all of this data we've gathered, is there a secret sauce to having great operations? And turns out we think there was. And so the first thing about this, interestingly, people often think process when they think back office. Oh, you're just going to tell me I need processes. And yes, I am. And I'm about to get to that one. But the first one, and it is step one for a reason, is all around managing your team well. So we looked right into things like how those firms are structuring the remuneration for their people, what the culture was like, right through to, do you involve your team in strategy planning in the business? Just all of that people-based information. Yes, HR, do you have job descriptions? Do you do staff reviews? All those sorts of things. But overall, we found that there was indeed a direct link between how well you manage your people. And we had two questions in there, or two elements in there that we used to determine if it impacted success. One was profitability, right? That's pretty typical. Most people understand a good business is a profitable business. But being consultants and having done this for so long, we also know that there's a huge qualitative element to whether a business is successful or not, because I've met people who are making a butt ton of money and they're not very happy and they don't have good relationships and they wouldn't profess to say that they've had a successful life, despite the fact that they might have a financially successful business. So it was important to us to then be able to say, hey, how happy are you with the success of your business? And so when we looked at what was effective in businesses, we were looking through both of those lenses, because I think that's really important, particularly, and I see the irony in this, like so many people overlook it, but we are in the business of risk management and wealth management. We are all about helping people achieve more of what they want in their life and protecting their families when we have very human things like depression, like accidents, like illness, like death. So therefore, when we're thinking about our businesses, it's really important to think through that lens as well, right? Anyway, sorry, I digress. So the impact of managing staff really well was definitely visible in profitability as well as happiness of the business. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but one I would like to call out, which is really quite interesting, is this effect of paying bonuses to all staff, right? So you can have a look in the research about all the different things that you want to be doing to make sure that you've got a great culture. And by the way, culture, we don't know about if it's a chicken and egg thing, but the better the culture is in the business, the more profitable it is and happier it is.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question on that. So that culture score, that was by the practice managers or the advisor, like everyone in the whole firm was rating that culture score?
The question was answered by whoever was doing the survey and the research. We did a whole bunch of interviews as well, but this was a quantitative score.
Yeah.
And so they were either practice managers or principals that were doing the research. There was a smattering of advisors that didn't have shareholdings or management capability, but the majority of them were people that would be considered leaders in the business. And so when they were talking about the culture score, they were talking about the score across the whole business.
Yeah, I understand. And so, you were going to the point of paying bonuses to all team members.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting thing and it's something that people are working on a lot at the moment. We seem to have a lot of conversations around this, is to say, well, I might do my business planning and have some goals about what I'm trying to achieve as a business. I'm getting great staff. It's harder and harder to keep good people and find good people. So people are more interested in saying, well, what can I do to build out this proposition for them? I think people call it an employee value proposition. What can I do to attract great people, but also retain them once I've got them? Because they're a finite resource and they are a hot commodity. You've got people tapping into your stuff on LinkedIn saying, hey, do you want another job? Hey, I've got this great opportunity for you. So if you don't keep them really happy where they are, it's not that they're necessarily going to go looking for something else. They're being tapped on the shoulder all the time.
Mm.
So culture and joy in a firm has a lot of different things. But if I focus on this quantitative element of actually paying bonuses, helping them share in the performance of the business, it's actually quite different to what some people would think. Because when you have a mindset of every man to himself and often a self-limiting one, you might think that if you're paying your staff more in the way of bonuses, that you're actually losing money because you're having to pay them. And so that's not money that you're keeping in your own pocket. So it's really interesting to see those who paid bonuses to all staff in the business when the business did well. Their average was a 27% EBIT, which you might think is not that great, because we're often saying most firms are trying to hit a 35% EBIT as a minimum. And when I say EBIT, I always have to clarify, we normalise EBIT by getting people to align their numbers with paying 150K plus super to principals.
It's in the report. I knew that because I read the report, so don't worry.
But so on that basis, the average was 27% if they pay bonuses to all staff who do well. On itself, that's not amazing. But when you compare it to the fact that in this data set, the average across the whole group of businesses was only 23%, that's quite a significant increase. And of course, that's only one element of managing your team really well. But I think it's a really important one to be able to say, well, we pay people really well. So understanding what the market is paying is important, but then bringing them to the table with what is happening from a strategy perspective. What are you trying to achieve in the business? And that in and of itself as well, for people who did involve their staff in strategy planning, that had an impact in and of itself on profit and also culture. But if they do that and then their team knows what's expected of them and can help the business owners to actually achieve those plans that they have in the business, then if everybody gets rewarded, I think the impact of that is both inclusion, feeling a part of something bigger than themselves, bringing more meaning to their role. They understand why they do what they do, but also why the business is doing what it's doing, and then reward them for really playing. And that I think is really helpful.
And that's been our experience. So we focus a lot on our culture. the thing about culture, and I'm glad it's kind of number one on this kind of secret sauce list, because I think it's kind of number one. And when I talk to other business owners, I try and be very pragmatic about it. And it can sound dehumanizing, so just bear with me, understand my intent.
Yeah,
but
where you go?
But I look about a business and go, if my business is made up of, 50, 60, 70% of the cost is in human beings.
Yeah.
And if I look at a manufacturing business and said 70% of my cost is in this machine that produces this product that we sell, we would make sure that machine is working optimally. We would make sure there's technicians there ready to go to keep that machine going. We're supporting that machine as best as we can to keep producing the product that we're selling.
Yeah.
But in financial services or in professional services, it feels like, culture and team it's becoming more and more a trend to fit, to work on it. But I just look very pragmatically and just go, that's a big cost of my business. I want to make sure we are retaining our people. We are, making sure our people are happy and we have a, good work culture purely from the dollars and cents point of view, and then overlay the human thing of we want to make sure I want to enjoy the workplace I'm in, as well as the people we have enjoying it. But just think about it from a machinery point of view. It just makes total sense to focus on that.
You would get it serviced. You would make sure that it's in good working order. I think culture is incredibly important, but also, and God, I could speak for hours on how you do that, because again, that's not necessarily easy. It's not just about being a good bloke. When you're a small business, if you've got less than 5 staff, it kind of is about being a good bloke or a good chick. To my good email colleagues that run business. Yeah, it's about being a good human. But once you get more than that, it's not organic. You need to have some more structure and rigor around how you make sure that your values become the business's values and it has a life of its own, and you have things to make sure that happens. But the other thing too is around training and developing your staff as well. We know that advisors have to have CPD, so they're going to get training and development, but there are ways to do that better than others. But what about all your other staff, the people that actually keep your engine room going and who are often the face of your business that do deal with clients and will pick things up when the advisor misses them and so forth? Where's your training and development for them? Is that on your roadmap as well? I think that's really key. Which actually leads me to the second step in that secret sauce, is this practice manager role. It was
exactly where I was going to go. So let's move on to that. You're a dedicated practice manager.
Yeah. So this start out by a mile. And again, I know that this is based on the size of the business, but as soon as you get to a point where you can afford to have a practice manager rather than the principal trying to wear all hats and have a full client load and manage the business, as soon as you can have somebody play that practice manager role, it makes a massive difference to the business. When we looked at EBIT alone, we actually thought it would be a greater impact on EBIT, to be honest. The average EBIT of those who did have someone in a management role, the average was 26% across the data set. But then when we separated out the rest to say, okay, all those who don't have anybody in a specific management role, that average was 22%. So it certainly did impact it. And the satisfaction of the business as well, that was a 3.9 out of 5. So it's not the golden ticket. It doesn't mean you're going to be 5 out of 5 and everything's going to be amazing. You're going to hit 40% EBIT immediately, but it makes a huge difference, because when you consider the amount of time and energy and effort that goes into actually running the business and doing it well and doing all these things that we're talking about, that is really hard to do well when you also have a whole client load.
So those numbers about, no manager, 22% EBIT, having a practice manager, 26%. I'd be interested to know, how much is that data skewed in terms of, so later on, you talk about businesses between $500,000 to $1 million in revenue have actually the lowest margins. Of the data set. So it relatively decent margin below 500K, then it drops down to 16% or something in that range, and then goes back up. And I wonder if it's because anyone above $1 million is starting to bring in that practice manager, or is that maybe having an impact that the data skews towards it being a bigger, more sustainable business?
Yes and no. So that purple patch between, it's not purple patch, it's the black patch between 5K and red. You see all the wrong colors. It's a Friday. that tends to be more people are putting on another advisor or more admin support. It's kind of rare that we see people bring a practice manager when they're still only a single advisor. So that dip between the 500 to 1 mil those are the really, I'm going to say basic, but I don't mean that in a derogatory terms, but those building blocks of building a business as opposed to somebody that's running a client book, right? It might be premises, it might be more technology, it might be more hardware, it might be more team members. Often getting that decision to bring on a practice manager is more when you're getting to I'd like to say 2, but it's often more 3 to 4 advisors. But one of the things I talk to a lot of people about is that you don't necessarily have to wait until you're broken before you bring a practice manager on, and that you've got enough revenue to support a full-time person. You might elevate one of your CSMs to be doing that practice manager role sort of 50% of the time or some of their hours. You could even bring in a part-time practice manager who's really organised. It can grow with the business. But the key, because it's such a big decision in any business to do it, there's a couple of keys. One is if you're the one that owns the business, so you're the one effectively being advisor and practice manager and chief bottle washer, it's really important for you to get clear on what do you love? Where's your sweet spot? What's the best place for you to be spending your time? Because if it actually is the management of the business, then your decision's going to be different. You're going to be bringing on advisors to take that client role.
That's right. And that's kind of my experience was I enjoy giving advice. I like, being in front of clients, but I actually moved myself out of client-facing activities before I brought on like a leadership team to do the practice management of it, because I found I was good at process development, that kind of practice management more than I was amazing at advising, because we'd kind of build some really we'd kind of systemize the advice point. And it was like, all right, what's the next problem I want to solve it? Because I enjoy solving the problems of the business. Yeah. And so that's where, I moved myself out of the advice, kind of moved into that, process and practice manager role.
Yeah. And so you're the perfect example of that's so critical, because I see too often people not enjoying their world because they're doing things that they feel that they should, as opposed to things that they really love and that they're necessarily really good at. So that's really important, is knowing your best place to play. And I mean, we've got all sorts of things that we work with firms through in terms of what are the different aspects of that role, what are the things that should be done. And sometimes with a smaller team, you can actually split them between different people. But ultimately, if you're going to get to a scalable, sizable business, you really want that on one person's shoulders. But the other thing around that is to then make sure that if you're bringing on a salary that's non-revenue generating, that you make sure that it really is revenue enabling. This is the language that we like to use between advice staff and non-advice staff. They might not be revenue generating because they can't sign off on the advice or a fee or so forth, but there should be revenue enabling. So if you're now putting on even if you go part-time, let's say you put on a 50 grand a year cost, well then what are the number of clients and the number of revenue that your advisors now need to uplift with that spare time that you now have in order to be able to fund that person? And that person should be bringing in great efficiencies in the business, lifting the capacity, lifting the capability of everybody in the firm to be able to serve more clients, or in the very least more profitable clients. If it's not clients by number, it might be revenue per client.
Yeah. And I mean, the hard thing is within a small business, you got to basically make a bet that the growth is going to be there. When you're growing, it's kind of easy. As you're growing, you're like, well, I know the growth will get us there, so let's just bring on bodies to do the work. And you got to kind of build a ship or build a plane as you're falling down the cliff.
Yeah.
But when you're not growing at a reasonable clip, it's kind of a bit harder to kind of go, oh, do I make that job? Because that will then enable that revenue, but the revenue still needs to come. So
it's. Or you were going to go to the next one, so was I. I was doing that.
Let me interview you. Just shut up for a second and let me drive it. Just anyone who may be hearing me for the first time, also, we've known each other for a long time. So telling Sue to sharp isn't as douchey as it may sound.
No, it's fine.
Apologies.
Totally fine, because I roll him it as often.
Yeah. So the next thing is about processes. Actually, this is the out of the three things, this actually had the biggest EBIT differential between processes and no processes. So
surely you're not surprised by that. Yeah. So we know very much, because I was I was leading this by saying it's about revenue generation. So you've got to make sure that you've got your marketing, you've got your centers of influence, and you've got new leads coming in all the time, and juggling that with the importance of process. And if you focus on one and not the other, it really just depends on the place that you are in your business and how quickly you need to be able to do that. But processes, I was saddened. I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but I was saddened with the sheer number of people that did not have processes in their business. So we asked the question, does your business have defined processes with a training manual where you've documented how to do all the tasks in your business? 37% had none, no process. Oh! And 28% were some processes are documented. So we only had 35% of the people in there said, yes, they had documented processes. I know they're boring. I know most people-facing people hate doing this because it's detail. They'd rather eat their foot trying to actually lock them down in a room to work through this. They just get all jittery. But you cannot deliver a really great human-centered, high-valued client service at scale when you're suddenly not relying on that individual human to be a good human and be helpful. You can't do that unless you actually have robust systems and processes in your business that everybody, they're a training tool for new people. They're a way to ensure that you're delivering a seamless service to people. Things don't fall through the cracks. All your boring stuff, like your processes and your documentation, your compliance stuff, all that just gets taken care of if you've got this really good process. And so, when we looked at the difference between if you did or you didn't have processes documented, 24.8% was the average EBIT for those who did, 19.5% was for those who don't. And as a consultant, as a business coach, I can tell you that a large part of the compliance issues, of the risk that happens in a business, is because of staff members doing stuff or forgetting to do stuff, or going off on their own bat that shouldn't be done.
This is for all the business owners out there. I'll step in our shoes. So it's easy for you to say this. You just don't know how hard it is to run an advice business. It's complex. It's difficult. So it's all good and well for a consultant to say this stuff, but you don't understand what it's like. That's the sentiment generally. One of the things that I would say in my business, Sky, we have processes better, like good, well-defined processes better than 95% of the market. Yeah. But it's nowhere near up to scratch as to what I think is good. And one of the difficulties we've had is because we're growing quite quickly and we are changing and adjusting, we want to be really nimble in terms of our improvements and the pace of iterative change. And that's where process documentation can sometimes be a bit difficult. Is we want to change what we're doing and make it better all the time. But one of the things that we've done really well, and it's actually really funny. So we use Loom to record our things. And one of the things that we've done, and just some of our team members started doing it, is when they start recording, they call it their vlogs. They're like, "Hey, thanks for watching my vlog. This vlog is going to be about whatever." And we've got young team members who, in the YouTube world, that they're all kind of in.
Excuse me, isn't it TikTok now?
Well, I don't know. I'm a boomer. I'm a hardcore boomer in my business. But it's just to actually help them kind of just go, let's just have a bit of fun with this training video and talk about it and then even signing off as, hey, make sure you like and subscribe, even though there's no mechanism within our training videos to do that. So they've kind of had a bit of fun doing that. So it's basically gone, people don't need permission to create these vlogs. It's like, hey, I've done this and there's nowhere kind of to find this, so I'll create it. And that's actually helped us a lot to build out better processes.
Awesome. Yeah. So I would suggest you are absolutely right that a big lengthy document that someone spends days and days and days to create flowcharts and swim lanes and all the rest of it, if that is created and then it's left, it's not very helpful. It might be helpful for a couple of months, but then usually people do iterate and improve and so forth over time. If you've got nothing, it's an important first step. gather it all together, make sure people, particularly when you've got a business where people have been doing whatever they want to do, in the first instance, you will find that they're all doing things different ways. So together, figure out the best way to do it and then get it documented. And then as you tweak and iterate, absolutely, those smaller videos, those training things, what I think becomes difficult for some firms is, where do I find that stuff? And so if people have done multiple videos of that, but they're different, if I'm a new team member and I'm then finding 2 different vlogs about how to do a particular thing, which one do I pick? So, and I'm sure you're already all over this, that if someone creates one, it's because there's not one there, or it replaces the other one and the other one is gone. You know, yes, to your point, I don't understand advisory firms. I do. I get it. I've run one. You know, I work with them all day long, every day. The key to that is, if someone's feeling, and I'm not meaning this disrespectfully, but if someone's genuinely feeling this business is too hard, I don't have time for those hypothetical consultant-driven nonsense around I must document this, then you are the very person that needs this, because you will never get out of your own way and build a business if that's your mindset. I'm sorry. But I'm really passionate about this, right? Because I've seen it. The longer you stuck in that mindset of going, it's too hard, I've just got to keep running, you're not going to be able to get your team all driving in the same direction and being able to take any of that responsibility off your shoulders, because everybody's going to keep coming to you going, how do I do this? How do I do that?
And my recommendation to those people is take point 6, which we will get to, is get external support, whether that's like literally mental health support, or whether that business, you know, coaching support, or, you know, and if those nasty consultants come into your business and work with, get support around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a way to do it, even if you don't love the sound of my voice or any of the stuff that my team do, where we're consulting people. VBP, we haven't now got, so we've always had the ability to create processes for people. So VBP obviously provide outsourced admin and paraplanning team members to people, so they become part of their team. And I know you're all over this because you have this awesome team in the Philippines that helps you drive your business. But when a team member starts, we actually document those processes of those tasks that a team member's doing, if they're not already documented in the business. And yes, we know 9 times out of 10 they're not. And that sometimes is the most valuable part of our service to firms that have never used outsourcing before. But we now have a standalone service for people if they are wanting to get all of their processes documented in their business, rather than having somebody, if they don't have someone in the team that's that way inclined and is process driven and has the time to actually get it all documented. Well, we do have a basic template that people can start from and then tweak. We've got done for you and done with you. So done for you is we can have our Six Sigma process people come in and work with your team and actually get it all documented for you. So you've got a starting point that you then tweak and iterate. And then if you need help on how to optimize those processes, then we can come and help you do that as well. But we also have this done with you. So if you do have a practice manager or someone that has the time to be able to organize your processes and all your whole operating rhythm and workflow management system, we've got this thing called Optimize Your Engine Room, which is a 3-month program. You're on a session with us every week. Oh, probably not you, hopefully, if it's not the business owner, unless you're like Phil and you're running the business, whoever's running the back office of your business. And it's a 3-month process to really look at how everything is managed in the business and really tweak it. So there is help out there if people don't know how or where to begin with us. But if there's one thing people can take away, it's you will always, if it's feeling hard, if your business is hard and hard work, then unless you sort of solve this, it's not going to change.
Yeah. That is, if you're not going to change anything, nothing's going to change. And so the next thing is about build a global team. Now, VBP's clearly put this in there with no data, just to say, hey, give us...
I want to correct this. I know, and I know what it looks like, right? But when we started writing this, we actually hadn't done the merger. So we actually started talking to VBP. We'd known them for years, obviously, because we had clients that used them. But they actually initially came on as a sponsor of the research because they wanted to be able to have some factual data driven by an independent group. And then over the months and months that we built it out, turns out they wanted to buy us and then they bought us. And so now it's a 50-50 thing. But I can absolutely tell you our integrity was not breached. Nobody ever asked us to do so either, the data that is in there. And in actual fact, it's proof point, because if I was surprised the numbers went higher than they were. So if it were that VBP made this stuff up, they would have been saying, it had a much bigger impact on EBIT.
That's right. The EBIT differential is like 23 to 25% between the two. And I mean, my experience, we do have a global team, and there are so many benefits outside of just the cost difference between team members. Like, it's just, I just love it. I love being able to engage with other cultures and communities and understand. Like, I love traveling, and a big part of like me and my wife and my family, we do love traveling, and the best thing about it is understanding other cultures. And so, I live in like the whitest suburb in Australia, it feels like. And so we do get very sheltered in our kind of environment. People look and smell and sound like me. Yep. And so in our work culture, it just has such an amazing diversity in our culture that yes, it's beneficial. It helps us, build out, scale our business. And being global is also means that, even if we hire, people in Australia, they don't need to be in my suburb. Yep. They can be in, Perth. They can be in Queensland. And so that's also the other thing that's really great about it. So the fifth thing is efficient investment management techniques. Now, I'm insurance only.
Yeah.
I'm going to extend this to also like thinking about like a house view on your insurance philosophy. Is that fair to kind of broaden that?
Yes, it is. And it's also about efficient deployment of that investment, of that risk philosophy. So the analogy probably doesn't sit all the way across this example, but in a sense it is around, so if I were to apply this to risk, it would be similar to saying, understand who your target market is, understand the key insurance providers that are going to be the best for your target market, and because we all know they have their specialties and their sweet spots, and ensure that the way that you deploy your insurances, and then make sure that you have consolidated reporting if people have got different policies with different providers, and so forth, that's really efficient and effective as well. It's probably not a direct thing, because obviously, as we know with investments, they're going to change more often than you would change a policy or a provider. But if you do have wealth management within your business, then having and I'm saying that because I know a lot of your audience are risk specialists. But if you do have that investment, it's around making sure that you've got, managed accounts. They took a lot longer than expected, or certainly than in the US, to really take off in Australia, but now people are really getting it. And so it's not only the value proposition piece to say, well, you're not standing in front of a client going, I'm going to outperform the market, and my expertise that you're paying for is all about investments, because if you are an advisor of the full client book, I challenge you any day of the week that you can do both really well. You might have absolute expertise and you contribute to it, but you have an investment committee, you manage your portfolios together with the team, and then it's deployed and executed really effectively through a managed account process.
Yeah, that's right. And that was actually kind of my question is do we see this, if we're trying to bring this into the risk space, do we see this kind of point number 5 as doing our insurance needs analysis house view, or limiting the companies we use? And from what I'm hearing, it's maybe considering limiting the companies that we use.
I think it's both. Like it's important to have that house view and your insurance philosophy that extends. I mean, it's nothing to do with managed accounts, but I would also say that should be extending to capturing how do we calculate the needs for someone's insured. What's the approach that we take to sitting down with a client, and then how many insurers are left in Australia now?
Well, like 9. Like, there's not much.
Yeah, so it's not as hard anymore to be across every policy and every inclusion and exclusion, every provider. But that's still not easy, right? To necessarily know all of them. So
that's right, and we've in my business, because we are specialised in insurance, and we have a broad. We don't specialise in one industry group or medicos or something like that. We work with anyone. And generally speaking, the average age is 34 years old. We don't limit any insurers, but we
can't in that model.
But we think about our processes needs to basically be very much exactly the same, because the level of cover makes no difference to us. I mean, there is commission and the link to the level of cover, sure. But in terms of our processes and anything we do with our clients, level of cover and the insurance company almost has no impact.
Yeah, it
So
should
that's
be
why we've
agnostic, right?
Yeah, that's why we are product agnostic, because it's like our start is the same for every client. Our end is the same for every client. And basically everything in between is the same for every client, whether it's one insurer over the other. Basically, our processes are the same because they work exactly the same. Don't send this to any insurers, but they're very commoditized. It's same in funds management, whether you use a Vanguard or BlackRock or whatever, it's all the same.
And that fact that so for anyone that's mishearing you, because I sometimes I see people go, oh, that's just a sausage factory. We give personalized advice. The fact that you have that process means that when you have different clients in front of you, you can give completely customized advice, and you're making sure that their insurance portfolio is absolutely perfect for their needs, because you probably, I'm guessing, would have the same way of calculating the multiple of the levels of cover. So whatever formula you use, multiple of their income or their debts, and how you incorporate all of that, the numbers will vary for the client because they're on different salaries and debt levels and the host of it. But the way you arrive at that piece of advice for them is consistent and methodical, and therefore effective. And even down to the point of when they push back on you and say, I can't have those levels of cover, I'm sure you have a process that you then follow to go, okay, well, if we're going to reduce it, these are the reasons why we need to be able to tick these boxes to be comfortable that we're putting you in a good
Exactly, yeah. And it's all the if this then that. Like if you're self-employed, then these are more important to you than so more important to us as a professional, knowing the products. These are more important. And if you have a family with young kids, these are the things I would change other than these. But if you're single, then it's very much a if this then that. And that's why I'm a massive believer in specialization and getting deep into kind of, because it's, I guess the point of these processes, it's so hard if you're doing everything for everyone. It's so hard to build processes. It's hard to build processes in our business. And we only do one thing. The start is the same, the end's the same, but the level of cover is always different, and insurer is always different. And the exclusions are always different as well.
Yeah. But then so the things that your team has to do to get them from A to B should be consistent.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the last point, the secret sauce, is invest in expert support.
Yeah. Surprise. That has an impact on coaching. So looking at people, and again, this was a little bit self-serving. We were really interested because we have our data on our clients. We do case studies. We know the impact that we have. And of course, it's amazing. But we wanted to know a little bit more broadly, because there's only so many people in this market that deliver coaching services. And I know coaching is not appropriate for all people. Some people just don't ever need it. They don't want it. That's fine. But we wanted to understand how many people do. So that was kind of interesting that we found 17% now, but only 21% had a coach in the past, but they didn't currently. So that happens a fair bit too. Sometimes people bring us in for a period of time and then go, cool, we've got our strategy for the next year. We'll get you back in a year to redo the business plan, but we don't consider it necessarily ongoing. 60% of them said that no, they didn't have one. So for those who did, if they had a coach or had one in the past, their average EBIT was 26.3%, compared to those who didn't was 22%. And I think that impact on satisfaction, I was kind of surprised. I thought it'd be a lot higher. It was 3.78 out of 5 as opposed to 3.62 on 5.
And let me explain from my experience why those make sense. And because that makes total sense for me, because so I use a business coach. If you ask me, has it been a massive impact on me personally? I would say it's been good, but it hasn't been a huge impact on me and my satisfaction in the business. But I've had team members say to me, I feel you seem so much more focused now that you're working with a coach and dialed in on kind of what the strategy is and the way you're thinking about the business, that I wouldn't have said was the case, because I'm
interesting because
I'm all in on this business, have been for the whole time, so I wouldn't have recognized that in myself, but other team members have. So in terms of that the reason why coaching works and I do it is because it just keeps you accountable, helps you be focused on kind of the things that are really important. And so that's where, that EBIT makes sense to me, because I mean, even in my business, it's had an impact. But the satisfaction makes sense that it's a small incremental change.
Yeah, and I do think that that's really great insight. I think it also is impacted by the stage of the business, right? So sometimes, and it's less impactful the larger you get, but when you're a smaller business, if you're making big decisions in the business, sometimes it is an investment. It might be an investment in a new advisor. They're not up to capacity yet. Sometimes that can impact the EBIT, but the satisfaction rating, I also see sometimes that people, once they get a coach and it really does get that clarity and that focus on what they want to achieve, that it's a big thing that I'm often surprised by when I ask clients or anybody when I'm out and about, so what are you trying to build? It's surprising how often people can't articulate that because they've never really thought of it. They don't actually have a vision. They're just, but they're in their business that's consuming and they're getting by, or they're doing really well and they're making stacks of money, but they've never actually looked forward and gone, well, where do I want to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What am I actually building here? And so when you start doing that, quite often that future vision of what they're trying to achieve, they're not there yet. And so there's this a bit of an emotional aspect sometimes to be going, I know what I can achieve without a coach. They're generally frustrated if they're not achieving it as fast as they would like. But with a good coach or a consultant in there, they can actually then see they've got the visibility that, all right, yeah, it is what it is right now. That's fine. And usually a good coach will help shine a light on stuff that they might not be seeing because they're too close to it. And that's what sometimes then has that impact on the current satisfaction because they know what they could be, but they're not quite there just yet. But I think, if we ask that question around, how the hope and their intentional focus on the business and what they feel they are now capable of achieving, I reckon that would be a significant difference. But like I say, the point of asking those questions was not about getting a sales pitch for a coach to be able to compare, but it was about seeing what's actually happening, right?
I know. I'm an inherently skeptical human being, so I always like to just push these points, but I also do it in myself. I always do, in all of our advice, needs analysis, like everything we do, I always go, are we self-serving or are we serving our clients? Because there is always this balance.
Right. And question.
And so it's with this report, it's very data led and that's what I love. But just going, because we could move, we could ask a question in a certain way to get us the answer. Like, do we have the answer that we're searching for and then get the data to get that there? And I always think about that in my business. How do we try not to do that?
Yeah. We've all seen, I think every piece of statistic, people can use different measures to be able to make it tell a story that they want, which is the thing that we're really crystal clear on. And my colleague Lana is the one that drove this report. She wrote almost all of it. She's incredible. She's our back office engine room guru. Anything that any one of us need to know when we start getting a little bit level of detail further than what we're really comfortable with, Lana will go, oh yeah, I've seen this. But Lana and I were always, when we looked at what other findings we were going to draw out, it was always, so what? Like, is this just a statistic? Is it interesting? And is it actually representative? Because sometimes there were some questions where there are only a small number of the data set that actually answered that question because it was quite dynamic. And so if we didn't have a good enough group, I think we landed on 50 participants, then we just went, look, let's just not use that stat because it might be interesting to us, but it's not really, it doesn't really stack up.
And that's why, I facetiously poke fun at that about self-serving, but the things that are self-serving for you, I'm a big advocate for. So like building out a global team, bringing in experts, I'm a massive advocate for that as well. So one of the other things I did want to touch on, and I'd love to hear your thought about, you did this post a few months back and was one of the reasons I reached out was talking about the Dunbar effect or Dunbar something or other. Dunbar. And it really got me thinking about like scale and looking at this report. So some of the numbers in this report that I just kind of pulled out is like 91% of the advice firms in your data set have less than 5 million revenue. 96% have 10 or less advisors in their business. So when thinking about advice and scale, so kind of my core question for you is, can advice as a business be a scale business, or will it always be either a small business or very large cross-subsidized vertically integrated business?
Oh, no. My answer would be it can absolutely be a scale business. But although let me clarify, when you say vertically integrated cross, what do you mean?
I mean product integration, like we've come from banks owning advice firms, cropped up like they're losing money on the advice because they're selling the products. And we're no longer there, but we may be moving back into that environment in the future.
Yeah. So there are...
Also, you really think so?
Sorry. Did that come outside? Oops, my mouth. So let me answer that question this way. There are the numbers in there. We wanted to get more and more larger firms in the business because the things that happen in a single advisor business are not necessarily representative of the whole profession. Notwithstanding the fact, I think the advisor rating stats is at something like 60 maybe, but somewhere between 60 and 65% of all businesses in advice.
Single AR or like 1 or 2.
Yeah. But then when we're talking about the percentage of total businesses, yes, it's a smaller percentage that are larger, but the impact and the number of advisors that work in there, if you talked about the breadth of advisor numbers and that whatever we are, 15,000, a lot of them are in these larger businesses. So if you're a single advisor, you can end up making a lot of money and you can be quite happy in your lane, getting the clients that you're getting. I would argue, though, that you don't have a business, and I'm not the first person to do that. There's books written on this stuff. You bought yourself a job. We all know that story, right? But particularly in advice, it becomes more difficult. Now, with risk, it's not quite so hard because your commissions, the trail commissions don't necessarily have such a strict connection to delivery of reviews and so forth, like an advisory fee might have. There obviously are still servicing obligations, we know that, but it's a little bit easier to be able to do those for a period of time if you don't have a licensed advisor on the tool. So if you were to get sick and be in hospital in a coma or whatever for 3 to 6 months, if you're an advice firm that's charging fees to their clients, you don't have a business anymore. You're going to switch those fees off unless you've got an arrangement.
Or refund them once you get back.
Exactly right. So it does make it a lot more risky and a lot more difficult than it ever used to be. We are seeing a lot of advisors now starting to merge together smaller firms so that at least they kind of have critical mass of, say, 3 to 4 advisors. So, and I do know that there's a lot of those who have built a good business, but they're tired and they don't have it in them anymore to now create these processes and start bringing on team members and so forth. So for them, their best outcome is these are the ones that go, no, what I love is advising clients. I don't want to be what Phil's doing and I don't want to start running the business. I just love serving my clients. For them, the greatest answer is merging in with a business that already has those systems and processes and so forth so that they can just do what they love, but they also still have equity in the whole smaller piece of a bigger pie. When it comes to scale, that bit in the middle, it doesn't mean that you have to have 100 advisors or 1,000 advisors before you're scalable. There are some really profitable businesses that are sitting around that 3 to 5 advisor number, and they're doing fantastic work for clients, and they are really changing people's lives. What I would say, to link it back to where we started here around those numbers of clients per advisor, we have to start lifting the number of clients that each advisor can serve because we don't have enough. We know that there's an underinsurance problem in Australia. There is not enough qualified advisors to deliver wealth management advice for the people who need it. And because of the education structure and the need for the professional year and so forth, we don't have enough people doing their PY right now to replace all the advisors that are leaving just through natural retirement, attrition, and so forth. So this problem is not going away anytime soon. So therefore, I'm really encouraging people to start thinking differently. If you think the cap of whatever the cap is that you think you have on the number of clients that each qualified advisor could serve, if you have not spent some serious time and energy thinking through how to lift that, whatever your current cap is, double it and then start looking at it through a whole different lens and go, what would I have to do in order to be able to achieve that without losing the quality of service and advice, without losing my quality of life and the enjoyment that I get from dealing with humans? What else can I be doing differently to enable that to happen on a larger scale?
Yeah, I mean, in that article, one of the things that you talked about is having a team service approach, and that's what we think about it at Sky is because we want Sky as a business and our team to serve our clients, and we actually I say it a little bit facetiously, but very honestly to the advisors. I'm sorry if you come to Sky, you're not the hero. of the business. Like
Yeah.
a lot of advice firms, the advisors are the heroes. They are the ones engaging the clients and potentially the only ones engaging the clients. And so I kind of say a little bit facetiously, but very candidly, that we're not going to elevate you as a hero. You are just as important as our client services team. You're just as important as me. We have an org chart and hierarchy. We've got leaders, but just in terms of that, like hero worship kind of environment and culture, I think having that team service approach really has to kind of address the fact that the advisors aren't the only ones who can talk to the clients or serve the clients.
Yeah. And I think where people have self-awareness, they understand that, yes, they have education and they're the expert and they have to, the business relies on them to be able to sign off on a piece of advice. But if they're truly, and maybe this is going to cut right to the heart for a few people, but if they're truly focused on serving the client the best way possible, then it can't revolve around them because they're in meetings with other clients half the time. They're needed in different areas. So for a great client experience, they need to know that it is a relationship with somebody else in the firm and it's not, there doesn't need to be this one relationship or one identity or personality that they have a connection with.
That's right. And I think potentially a fear is like advisors feel like, well, we become a bit more disposable. If I don't hold a relationship, I don't get to keep my job because, and also potentially that, well, I can't just take the clients to the next firm I go to. So there is sometimes this fear of, making myself replaceable means I can get replaced. And I talk to my team like broadly, it's like the sooner you can replace yourself, the more valuable you are to that business. Like we want people to continue to replace the work that they're doing with automation, with processes, with whatever it is. And you just become infinitely more valuable.
Yes, absolutely right. Yeah, you're so true. And I think most people that we speak to get that in theory. Sometimes the actual behaviors take a little while to catch up with that. But when you really understand that the client's at the center of everything, you are a team that's built around them, and you want to leverage technology and automation as much as possibly can to deliver that better outcome for them, then people lean into it. And we also know that human nature, a lot of people do resist change. Not in theory, they know change is good and it's powerful and it's important, but when you actually start asking them to change the fundamentals of the habits that they just do without thinking, that can be a little bit more difficult. But ensuring that your clients can have their needs met in a fast turnaround time. When they need something, they not only are comfortable talking to somebody else at the firm, but also they get their answers as quickly as they can do. Then it's actually really empowering for the advisor because they then can start to live this, I'm actually making a difference to more humans.
Yeah.
And you can only do that as part of a team that works together really well.
Well, Sue, I've taken so much more extra time than I asked for, so thank you very much. Some of the interesting facts just tidbits I got from the report. So anyone who wants to report, I'll put them in the show notes. But like one of the interesting things I found was self-licensed and large licensed advice firms had the same satisfaction level, and medium licensees or actually had the lowest satisfaction level, which is it seems a little counterintuitive. You'd think larger licensees, people are kind of frustrated with the bureaucracy, but it's actually, the same amount of satisfaction.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is one of those examples, Phil, where I would say don't read too much into that because there's so many variables that come into play, right? It depends on the actual licensees that they're with. That depends on their growth intentions of the business and so forth. I could say a really broad brush that by the time, if they're with a really, really large licensee, then they have worked together with them. Because if you also look at the licensees that are in that large bucket now, they've had significant change over the last period of time. So the advisors that are still with them now have probably made a conscious decision that the growth and the what they're trying to build in their own business suits the licensee model, right? But again, there's just too many variables. So I wouldn't be reading a huge amount into that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because it's kind of different to what I would have assumed the market would have said. But
yeah, well, it's a scale thing again, right? The larger the licensee, the more resources they have to be able to serve the needs of the people within them. There are some smaller licenses. I mean, all of them are really struggling. They don't have the margins they use. Well, I shouldn't say struggling. That's an incorrect term. All of them.
It's a hard business.
It is a hard business to be in. They're not as profitable as they used to be. And we now know that they're certainly not as valuable as they used to be because the value is in the end business and the advice, which is why some of them are investing in them.
2 last questions for you. When do you get a chance to do your emails?
I would like to say I clean my inbox every single day and I have a specific time set throughout the day to be able to do it, and I do not. It depends whether I'm on the road, if I'm speaking, if I'm planes or whatever. So I'm a bit more of I'll get them when I can, and I do my level best to derive my working day out of my Asana board and not my emails, as I tell everybody that's really important to do.
Yeah, cool. And what's one interesting hobby that you have?
Kid wrangling. It's not really that interesting. I hate this question because right now I'm still consumed by my business. Even though I am with a part of VBP now, I'm not the only shareholder. That still takes a lot of my working time and effort. And I have 4 kids and a Dalmatian and 2 cats. So any other spare time I have, I'm hanging out with them. I wanted to say it's cold water dipping, like the ice baths, because I was doing that for a while and I haven't done it. So I'd be lying. Wow.
I mean, it can be your most interesting hobby that you will get back to doing, maybe?
True.
Yeah.
True. No, I would say more, that would be more gourmet cooking because we've just bought a new house and I'm going to have a better kitchen. So I'll get back to cooking for fun and not function, which is what happens when you have 4 kids.
Yeah. Awesome. And how do people get in contact with you?
So my email address is sue@vbp.au. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, connect with me through there. Always happy to have a chat and share knowledge. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Issa, for coming on. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for the chat.
All right. Bye.
See ya.
If you've enjoyed this episode and you think someone else will get value out of it, I'd love it if you could forward it on to them. And as always, we can continue the conversation in the My Risk Advisor Facebook group. All you need to do, open up Facebook and search My Risk Advisor, and I'll see you in there.